Jasmine Crockett didn't raise her voice. She didn't roll her eyes or speak with outrage. When asked about Melania Trump's role during Donald Trump's presidency, she responded in a way that was almost understated, but that's what made it so impactful. Her words weren't dramatic. They were composed, thoughtful, delivered like someone who had been watching, listening, and waiting for the right moment to speak truth as she saw it. Crockett didn't aim for shock value. She aimed for honesty, and that made all the difference. During the live segment, surrounded by political analysts and commentators, Crockett chose a route many politicians avoid. Instead of resorting to personal attacks, she pointed out a pattern, a deliberate silence, a noticeable absence from major conversations that shaped America during those 4 turbulent years. She framed her argument not with spite, but with clarity. Melania Trump, she said, had the platform and the visibility to speak out on matters that impacted millions. But she rarely did. What made this so striking was how calm Crockett remained. The typical image of cable news debate is one filled with crosstalk and volume. But she sat still, hands folded, tone unwavering, and said, Melania Trump was the most silent first lady in modern American history. It wasn't a jab, it was a diagnosis. And for many watching, especially those who had wondered about Melania's role or lack thereof, the statement struck a chord. That moment, so composed, so pointed, challenged a common expectation, that political critique must come with drama. Instead, Crockett's demeanor forced people to really listen. She wasn't shouting for attention, she was presenting an argument that stood on its own merit, and the merit came from something many Americans had already noticed. A first lady who, during a time of racial tension, a deadly pandemic, and national protests, chose to remain largely invisible. What made Crockett's words even more potent was her choice not to insult, but to observe. There was no mocking tone. She didn't speculate about Melania's character or intentions. She stuck to the public record. The long stretches of silence, the lack of meaningful advocacy, the handful of moments where Melania did step forward, such as when she wore that controversial green jacket that read, "I really don't care, do you?" and the confusion it left behind. By staying composed, Crockett placed the spotlight where it belonged, not on herself, but on a conversation about accountability and leadership. She made clear that she wasn't interested in tabloid style, feuds or personality clashes. Her concern was deeper, the role of influence, and whether someone, simply by standing beside power, has a responsibility to speak when it matters. In that sense, Crockett's calmness wasn't just a rhetorical style, it was a strategy. It stripped away defensiveness. It invited the audience to think, rather than react. And it didn't give critics an easy path to dismiss her as just another angry Democrat. Instead, she came across as someone who had paid close attention. Someone who had been waiting for a question just like this one, and knew exactly what she wanted to say. People often remember political commentary that's loud or sensational, but this was different. Crockett's tone drew viewers in rather than pushing them away. It made her critique harder to deflect, harder to spin as mean-spirited. She wasn't there to throw punches, she was holding up a mirror, and the image that reflection gave back of a silent first lady in a noisy, chaotic time couldn't be easily ignored. For someone like Donald Trump, who thrives on loyalty and image control, Crockett's comments weren't just frustrating, they were destabilizing because the attack didn't come from the usual playbook. It wasn't crude or over the top. It was elegant, sharp, and deliberate. It came not from anger, but from observation. And in politics, sometimes that kind of critique leaves the deepest bruise. When Jasmine Crockett brought up Melania Trump's infamous, "I really don't care, do you?" jacket, it was as if she had quietly unlocked a memory the country had tried to shelve. The image resurfaced instantly. Melania, walking across the tarmac in heels and sunglasses, wearing that green military-style jacket with those words scrawled on the back. It wasn't just clothing. It was a moment that sparked controversy, confusion, and criticism across the political spectrum. Crockett didn't dramatize it. She simply referenced the moment as a defining symbol of what she believed to be detachment from the issues that were ripping at the country's moral seams. She said it plainly, when children were being detained at the border, when images of crying toddlers in cages were flooding the media, Melania chose to visit the facility, wearing a jacket that read, "I really don't care, do you?" Crockett didn't need to exaggerate. The facts did the talking. And that's what made her comment resonate so deeply. It wasn't just about a jacket. It was about what that moment represented, a broader pattern of tone deafness, silence, and missed opportunities. Crockett was pointing to a first lady who, at one of the most emotionally charged moments in recent U.S. history, projected a message that was either staggeringly indifferent or so carelessly framed that it came across that way. Neither option, in her view, was acceptable. Crockett framed a moment not as a personal dig, but as a statement of values. "That tells us everything we need to know," she said, referring to the jacket. And in many ways, it did. For supporters of Donald Trump, that jacket might have been dismissed as a misunderstanding, or even defended as a deliberate act of trolling the media. But for others, especially those watching with concern as the administration rolled out its zero-tolerance immigration policy, the jacket felt like a gut punch, a moment that encapsulated how disconnected the first family could seem from the pain playing out across the country. Donald Trump, ever attuned to criticism of his family, reportedly reacted swiftly and angrily to Crockett's words. According to one insider, he saw it not just as an attack on Melania, but as an attempt to rehash and weaponize what he considered old fake outrage. But for many Americans, the memory of that jacket hadn't faded. It remained a symbol, one Crockett brought back into focus with precision. Melania Trump, for her part, had later claimed that the jacket was meant as a message to the media, not the children. But Crockett, like many others, questioned the judgment behind wearing such a piece at such a moment. "It's about leadership," she said in a follow-up appearance. "It's about messaging, and whether you like it or not, everything you do, especially as First Lady, sends a message." In Crockett's view, this moment with the jacket wasn't an isolated misstep. It was emblematic of a broader absence, a tendency to avoid taking strong stances, to stay quiet when a voice was most needed. While past First Ladies had used their platforms to champion causes or challenge injustice, Crockett argued that Melania had often chosen silence, and when she did speak, or appear, the moments were either hollow or misjudged, like the jacket. By bringing it up, Crockett wasn't just recounting history. She was asking a bigger question. What does it mean to be present in a role that holds national influence? What does it mean when someone, with immense visibility and opportunity, chooses ambiguity or silence instead? The reference to the jacket worked because it was real, visible, and unforgettable. It wasn't hearsay or a political talking point. It was an image captured on camera, broadcast to the world, and seared into the national memory. And when Crockett held it up as an example, she forced the audience to remember it not as a blip, but as a defining snapshot of an administration and a First Lady, often criticized for being out of step with the emotional gravity of the moment. For Donald Trump, who values strong branding, public loyalty, and image control, Crockett's remarks weren't just a critique. They were a threat to the carefully curated legacy he's tried to build around his family. And by resurfacing that one jacket, Crockett cut through the noise and went straight to the heart of the matter. Donald Trump is no stranger to criticism. Over the years, he's been called out, debated, investigated, and even impeached twice. But when someone goes after his family, especially Melania, his reactions become personal, swift, and deeply emotional. So when Jasmine Crockett brought up Melania Trump's absence and disengagement as First Lady on live television, no less, Trump's response wasn't just political, it was visceral. Insiders say that he had just finished a meeting at one of his golf clubs when an aide handed him a phone. A clip of Crockett's segment was already going viral. The screen showed her calmly discussing the roles of various First Ladies. Michelle Obama, she said, had embraced the role with authenticity. Jill Biden, she added, brought compassion and a sense of service. But when it came to Melania, Crockett's tone didn't change, but her words cut sharp. Melania Trump was the most silent First Lady in modern American history, she said, and silence is a statement in itself. Trump reportedly didn't finish watching the clip. He put the phone down hard and asked, "Who the hell does she think she is?" He was visibly angry, according to a source close to him. And it wasn't because the critique was loud or offensive. It was because it was subtle and yet devastating. That kind of reaction says a lot about how protective Trump is of Melania. He's gone to great lengths to shield her from public attacks, often defending her more passionately than he does members of his own staff. For someone who operates with a deep focus on loyalty and image, having his wife portrayed as indifferent or checked out stung in a way that simple political disagreement never could. Within hours, a statement from Trump's camp was released. It called Jasmine Crockett just another loudmouth Democrat desperate for relevance, and accused her of dragging a gracious and elegant First Lady into a baseless partisan smear. The wording was combative, classic Trump style, but the speed of the response showed how deeply it struck a nerve. What's interesting is how calculated Trump's team is when it comes to public relations. They don't respond to every jab or TV comment. But this one was different. Crockett didn't just criticize policy, she touched on legacy, on how the First Lady is remembered. And to Trump, legacy is everything. Even though Melania has always maintained a more private role compared to her predecessors, Trump has consistently presented her as dignified, stylish, and misunderstood by the media. Her Be Best campaign, despite its limited scope, was often cited as proof of her compassionate side. Trump believes Melania has been unfairly targeted and underappreciated, especially when compared to the adoration Michelle Obama received. So Crockett's comments, delivered so calmly and matter-of-factly, felt to him like an attempt to rewrite that narrative. And he wasn't having it. But the reality is, Crockett didn't insult Melania. She didn't use sarcasm or condescension. That's what made her commentary even more effective, and, for Trump, more infuriating. The lack of theatrical flair made it difficult to discredit. There was no shouting, no name-calling, just a measured critique of silence in the face of responsibility, and that's exactly why Trump's reaction was so intense. Some aides tried to downplay it later, saying Trump wasn't really upset, just tired of Democrats using his family as political punching bags, but those who know him say otherwise. His frustration wasn't just that Crockett criticized Melania, it was how she did it. No one shouted over her, no one dismissed her. Her tone gave her words more power than if she had made the same point with sarcasm or snark. The ripple effect was immediate. News outlets picked up the story. Social media accounts lit up. And Trump, who always keeps a close eye on what's trending, couldn't escape the fact that for a brief moment, the national conversation was revolving around a question he had long tried to silence. Did Melania do enough as First Lady? Crockett didn't accuse, she observed, and sometimes, that's more dangerous, especially for someone like Trump, who prefers bombast and spectacle to quiet, reflective critique. By forcing people to reconsider Melania's place in history, without ever raising her voice, Jasmine Crockett hit a nerve that Trump couldn't ignore. After the television segment aired, as clips of Jasmine Crockett's comments circulated rapidly online, many assumed she might walk back what she had said about Melania Trump. After all, she had made a pointed critique on national television, and it had clearly touched a nerve with Donald Trump and his supporters. The backlash was swift, with the former president's team accusing her of disrespect, bias, and opportunism, but Crockett didn't flinch. Instead of softening her stance, she doubled down calmly, directly, and with unmistakable clarity. In a follow-up interview the next day, she addressed the controversy head-on. This isn't about attacking Melania personally, Crockett said, her voice steady. It's about leadership. If you're going to take on that role, you've got to show up. And sometimes silence can be louder than words. It was a bold move, not just because of who she was criticizing, but because of how calculated Donald Trump is when it comes to controlling the public narrative around his family. He often pushes back hard against even the mildest criticism of Melania, especially when it comes from women of color, as it fits into a broader strategy of framing his family as the victims of unfair media scrutiny. But Crockett wasn't intimidated. She didn't engage in name-calling, and she didn't change the subject. She stayed focused on the message she had already delivered. For many, that refusal to back down showed something that resonated far beyond partisan politics. It showed consistency. Crockett wasn't trying to score political points. She wasn't trying to be sensational. She believed what she said, and she stood by it. In fact, she used the opportunity to broaden the discussion. Crockett spoke, not just about Melania, but about the broader expectations of those who serve in public roles, especially those who, while unelected, hold significant influence. The First Lady isn't just a ceremonial figure, she explained. She's a cultural leader, a symbol of compassion, and a voice that people, especially young women, look to. When you go quiet during moments of national pain, people notice. It was clear she wasn't going to be bullied into silence. And that's precisely what made her comments linger in the public discourse. She didn't insult Trump's wife. She didn't resort to pettiness. She simply questioned the absence of engagement, especially during defining moments like the child separation crisis, the nationwide protests for racial justice, and the early chaos of the COVID-19 pandemic. For Crockett, leadership isn't about photo ops or speeches carefully crafted by aides. It's about being present and vocal when it matters most. Donald Trump, unsurprisingly, didn't take kindly to this framing. He reportedly told close advisors that Crockett was picking on Melania because she knows she can't touch me, framing it as a strategic attack through his wife. He believed the commentary was politically motivated, timed to make noise as election season intensified. But if that was the case, Crockett didn't act like someone looking for a headline. She turned down multiple tabloid-style interviews and stuck to serious political commentary. In the following days, when asked again whether she would consider apologizing, she calmly declined. It's not about being mean, it's about being honest, she said. And when you have power, even symbolic power, choosing silence is still making a choice. The way she held her ground, not emotionally, not defensively, but with consistency and composure, added legitimacy to her argument. It also made it harder for Trump's circle to discredit her. She wasn't inflammatory. She wasn't chasing drama. She was simply unwilling to say something she didn't believe. And in a political environment where many backpedal as soon as a controversy ignites, Crockett's refusal to do so stood out. It drew both praise and criticism, but what it didn't draw was regret. She knew that Donald Trump's immediate reaction, the fiery pushback, the demands for an apology, the efforts to reframe her as just another angry liberal were part of a familiar playbook. But this time, she didn't give that playbook the usual fuel. She refused to play into the outrage. and instead calmly stuck to her point. Asterisk her resolve forced a deeper discussion, not just about Melania and Trump, but about how we view silence from public figures and whether it should be considered a neutral stance or a form of neglect. And no matter how loudly Donald Trump reacted, Crockett never changed her tone. She believed what she said, and she wasn't going to walk it back, just to ease the discomfort it caused. Asterisk. Jasmine Crockett's comments about Melania Trump may have sparked backlash, but what they really did was open the door to a broader, more necessary conversation about public responsibility, especially for those who, while not elected, still carry immense cultural weight. Her words weren't delivered with malice. They weren't designed to inflame, but they were honest, and in today's political climate, honesty often stings more than outrage. Asterisk by pointing out Melania's silence during pivotal moments, from the separation of migrant families to the unrest following George Floyd's death. Crockett brought attention to a legacy that, in her view, had been carefully shielded from scrutiny. And when she referenced the now infamous "I really don't care, do you?" jacket, she wasn't just talking about fashion. She was addressing what many saw as a symbolic gesture of detachment during a humanitarian crisis. In a time where visibility and empathy matter, Crockett questioned the message that was being sent, or more pointedly, not sent, by someone in Melania Trump's position. Asterisk Donald Trump's fiery reaction only magnified the moment. It revealed how protective he remains over his family's public image and how deeply he values control over their narrative. To him, Crockett's calm criticism was a threat, not because it was loud or exaggerated, but because it was credible. She didn't attack Melania with insults. She didn't make wild accusations. She asked a question that resonated with many Americans. Where was the voice of compassion when it was most needed? Asterisk. And when the backlash came, Crockett stood firm. She didn't retreat, apologize, or soften her message to satisfy media cycles or party pressure. Instead, she restated her point with the same calm clarity. That consistency, that refusal to bend to political heat, earned her both admiration and scorn. But more importantly, it made her message impossible to ignore. Asterisk in the end. This moment wasn't just about one First Lady or one Congresswoman. It was about how we define leadership, how we evaluate silence, and whether visibility without engagement truly serves the public good. Melania Trump may have chosen a quieter path during her time in the White House, but Crockett challenged the notion that silence should be immune from accountability. Asterisk. And in doing so, she reminded the country that leadership isn't only about titles or roles. It's about showing up, speaking up, and standing firm even when the easy path is to stay silent. Whether you agreed with her or not, Jasmine Crockett didn't just stir controversy. She raised the bar for what we expect from those who hold influence and refuse to apologize.